Something happened last night that I still cannot fully explain, even now, as I sit here trying to put everything into words. Part of me keeps wondering whether I should tell you at all. Maybe some secrets are better left buried. Maybe there are truths that do more damage when they finally see the light, but there is one thing I know for certain. Last night, someone who has been carrying a secret for far too long finally decided they could not carry it anymore, and the secret they revealed changed everything. It began with a message. It was late. The kind of late when the world becomes quiet and every little sound seems louder than it should. I was almost ready to put my phone away when I saw their name appear on the screen. For a moment, I just stared at it. There are certain names that can change the atmosphere of a room without making a sound. Their name was one of them. I had known for some time that something was different about them. I could feel it even when they insisted everything was fine. There had always been moments when they seemed distracted, distant, almost as if half of their mind were somewhere else. Whenever I asked what was wrong, they would smile. Nothing. That was always the answer. Nothing. But last night, they finally admitted that there had never been nothing. There had always been something. They asked me to meet them somewhere quiet. I remember reading the message several times before responding. There was something about the way they had written it that made me uneasy. They did not sound angry. They did not sound afraid. They sounded tired in a way that made me realize they had been fighting something inside themselves for a very long time. When I arrived, they were already there. They were sitting alone, staring into the distance. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then they looked at me and said something I will never forget. I should have told you a long time ago. I asked what they meant. They looked away. I didn't know how. That answer frightened me more than anything else could have, because when someone says they don't know how to tell you something, your mind immediately begins creating possibilities, and none of mine were good. They finally stood up and walked toward me. I need you to listen until I'm finished, they said. Please don't interrupt me. Please don't leave before I tell you everything. I promised. Then they began. They told me that before we met, there had been someone else in their life, someone they had known for years, someone whose presence had once meant everything to them. They told me that relationship had ended badly, not because of an ordinary argument, not because two people simply grew apart. Something much bigger had happened, something that had changed the direction of their entire life. And then came the part that made my heart stop. They told me that person was dead. I didn't know what to say. They watched my face carefully. I didn't kill them, they said quickly. Those words only made the silence heavier. I asked why they had said that. They took a long breath. Because everyone thinks I was responsible. Everyone. That word stayed in my mind. I asked them what they meant. They explained that years ago, the person who had died had been involved in a situation that became increasingly complicated. There were arguments, accusations, broken promises, people taking sides, and on the night everything changed, my soulmate had been the last person known to have spoken to them. The authorities had questioned them, friends had questioned them, family members had questioned them, Even people who claimed to love them had looked at them differently afterward, but there had never been enough evidence to prove that they had caused what happened. The case eventually went quiet. Life moved forward, at least, from the outside. But they never moved forward. They carried that night with them everywhere. Then they said something that confused me. I didn't cause their death, they whispered. But I know why it happened. I stared at them. What does that mean? They closed their eyes. It means I knew something was going to happen. That sentence changed the entire conversation. They explained that on that night, they had received a warning. Someone had told them that something terrible was about to happen. They ignored it. They thought it was manipulation. They thought it was another attempt to pull them into an argument. So they walked away. And afterward, when they learned what had happened, they realized the warning had been real. They had spent years believing that if they had listened, if they had stayed, if they had made one different decision, perhaps everything could have been different. That was the secret they had been carrying, not that they had intentionally caused someone's death, but that they believed their decision had allowed a tragedy to happen. I have replayed that night thousands of times, they told me. Their voice became quieter. Every version ends the same way. I didn't know what to tell them. There are moments when comforting words feel almost insulting because the pain is too complicated for simple reassurance. So I just listened. Then they revealed another secret. They had known me before we officially met, not personally, not in the way I imagined, but they had seen me. They knew things about my life before I ever told them. They knew places I had been. They knew certain details about my past. At first, I thought that was impossible. Then they explained. The person who had died had once been connected to someone in my own life. Someone I had completely forgotten about. Someone whose name I had not heard in years. That was when everything became even more unsettling. I asked why they had never told me. They said they were afraid that if I knew the truth, I would see them differently, afraid that I would think they had approached me for the wrong reasons, and, most of all, afraid that I would realize our meeting had not been entirely accidental. That sentence stayed between us. I asked them what they meant. They looked directly at me. I was supposed to stay away from you. My stomach tightened. Why? Because you were connected to the secret. I didn't understand. They explained that after the death, they had spent years trying to understand what had really happened. During that search, they discovered a connection between the person who died and someone from my past. That connection eventually led them to me. At first, they only wanted answers. They wanted to understand why certain things had happened. They wanted to find out whether I knew anything. They never expected to become emotionally attached. They never expected me to become important. And they certainly never expected to fall in love. But once I realized what you meant to me, they said, I couldn't leave. That was the moment I finally understood why our relationship had always felt different. There had always been something strangely familiar about them. Something I could never explain. Maybe that was why, maybe, from the beginning, they had known there was a story connecting us, a story neither of us had fully understood. Then they reached into their pocket and pulled out an old photograph. They handed it to me. I looked at it. My heart dropped. I recognized someone in the picture. Someone from my own past. Someone I had not thought about in years. I looked back at them. "Where did you get this?" They didn't answer immediately. Then they said, "It belonged to the person who died." I felt the entire world become strangely quiet. They explained that the photograph had been found among old belongings. On the back was a date. A date that meant something to both of us, a date connected to a moment from my childhood, a moment I had almost completely forgotten, and suddenly, memories began returning, small memories, a conversation, a place, a face, a feeling, pieces of something I had never understood. They told me that the person who died had been investigating the same mystery before their death. They had discovered that someone had been hiding information for years, someone close to them, someone they trusted, and the night they died, they had planned to reveal everything. But they never got the chance. My soulmate looked at me and said, "That's why I was scared to tell you." I asked them what they were scared of now. Their answer was simple, that whoever kept the secret before might still be watching. Neither of us spoke for a while. The strange thing is that fear didn't immediately take over. Instead, I felt something else, clarity. For the first time, so many strange moments from the past began to make sense. The unanswered questions, the sudden disappearances, the phone calls that ended whenever I walked into a room, the people who refused to discuss certain names. The feeling that someone had been keeping part of the story from me. It wasn't imagination, there really had been something hidden, and now I was standing in the middle of it. I asked them whether they believed the person responsible was still alive. They nodded, yes. That single word changed everything. They told me that for years, they had been trying to find proof. They had searched through old records. They had spoken with people who knew what happened. They had followed leads that went nowhere, and eventually, they found something, a piece of evidence, something small but important, something that could potentially explain what happened that night, but they had been too afraid to use it, until now. They handed me another envelope. Inside was a collection of papers, names, dates, notes, old messages, everything connected. I didn't read all of it. I couldn't. It was too much to process. Instead, I looked at them. "Why tell me now?" They looked exhausted, because I realized I was becoming the same kind of person I hated. "I didn't understand," they continued. "I was keeping you in the dark because I thought I was protecting you." They shook their head, but secrets don't protect people forever. Eventually, they become walls. Then they said the thing that hurt the most. "I don't want to lose you because I was too afraid to tell you the truth." For a moment, I didn't know whether to be angry or heartbroken, maybe both, because love doesn't automatically make betrayal disappear. Knowing that someone kept something enormous from you changes the way you remember everything, every conversation, every promise, every moment when you asked, "Is there something you're not telling me?" And they said no. But at the same time, I could see how terrified they were, not terrified for themselves, terrified of what the truth might do to me. So I asked the question I had been avoiding: did you ever use me to get answers? They looked at me for a long time. At first, I wanted answers, they admitted. My chest tightened. But then I met you. They stepped closer, and somewhere along the way, you stopped being part of the mystery. Their voice cracked. You became the person I wanted to protect from it. I didn't respond, because sometimes the hardest thing isn't discovering that someone lied. It's realizing that the lie came from a complicated place: fear, guilt, love, regret, all tangled together. Before we left, they told me one final thing. There was another reason they had decided to reveal everything last night. They had received a message from an unknown number. It contained only one sentence: "I know you." Finally told them. That was when I understood why they had been so nervous. Someone knew. Someone had been paying attention. Someone knew the secret was no longer a secret. I asked them what they planned to do. They said they didn't know. For years, they had believed that uncovering the truth would give them peace. Now that the truth was finally coming out, they realized peace might not be what followed. Sometimes answers create more questions. Sometimes opening a locked door doesn't reveal freedom. It reveals another hallway, and another door, and another secret waiting behind it. As we walked away, I looked at the photograph again. For the first time, I noticed something I had missed before. There was a person standing in the background. Someone neither of us had mentioned. I showed it to them. They froze. Their expression changed. Immediately, "You know who that is?" They stared at the photograph. Then they whispered a name. I recognized it, and suddenly, I understood why they had looked so frightened when they first arrived. The person in the photograph wasn't a stranger. It was someone who had been part of our lives all along, someone we had both trusted, someone who had spent years telling us they knew nothing about what happened. Neither of us spoke. We simply stared at the photograph. Then their phone rang. The screen showed the same unknown number. Neither of us wanted to answer. But eventually, they did. There was silence on the other end. Then a voice spoke: "You should have left the past alone." The call ended, and that was when I realized something. The secret my soulmate revealed last night wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning, because now I know the truth they carried. Now I know about the person who died. Now I know about the warning they ignored. Now I know that our meeting wasn't entirely accidental. And now I know that someone else has been watching. But there is one thing I still don't know. Why me? Why was I connected to this story? Why did someone from my past appear in that photograph? And why did the person who died have something that belonged to someone in my family? Those are the questions I need answered now. Maybe the truth will hurt. Maybe it will change everything I believe about the people I trust. Maybe it will reveal that the person I thought was my soulmate was not telling me the whole story after all. But last night taught me something I will never forget. Secrets don't disappear simply because people stop talking about them. They wait. They survive in photographs, old messages, forgotten memories, and unanswered questions. And sometimes, after years of silence, they find their way back into your life. Sometimes they arrive in the middle of the night, sometimes they arrive through a person you love, and sometimes the person standing beside you is carrying a truth so enormous that revealing it can change both of your lives forever. My soulmate finally told me their shocking secret last night. They weren't responsible for the death, but they were there. They knew something was coming. They walked away, and they spent years believing that choice was unforgivable. Now I know why they were afraid. Now I know why they kept looking over their shoulder. Now I know why they never wanted me to ask too many questions about the past. And I know one more thing. The story isn't over, because somewhere out there is the person who knows what really happened. Someone who has been silent for years. Someone who just learned that the secret has finally been revealed. And if the message we received last night is any indication, they aren't going to let the truth come out easily. But this time, we aren't running from it. This time, we're going to find the answers. Not because we want revenge, not because we want to punish anyone, but because the truth has been hidden for too long. And after everything that happened last night, I don't think either of us can pretend anymore. The past has finally caught up with us, and whatever happens next, we are going to face it together. The next morning, I woke up with one thought repeating over and over in my mind. The phone call, that voice, those words. You should have left the past alone. I kept trying to convince myself that maybe I had misunderstood what happened. Maybe the fear in my soulmate's eyes had made everything feel more dramatic than it really was. But then I remembered the photograph, the person standing in the background, the person we both recognized, and suddenly, pretending everything was normal became impossible. I reached for my phone. There was a message waiting. No name, no number I recognized, just a photograph. I opened it. My heart sank. It was the same location from the old photograph, but this picture had been taken recently, very recently. Someone had returned there. Someone had taken the photograph knowing exactly what it meant. And beneath the picture was another message. You are closer than you think. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever. Then I called my soulmate. They answered almost immediately. You got it too, didn't you? I didn't need to ask what they meant. Yes. There was silence. Then they said, we need to talk. We met later that day. This time, there were no dramatic introductions, no mysterious envelopes, no attempts to soften the truth. We both knew we had crossed a line. Whatever happened next, there was no going back. They placed the old photograph on the table. Then they placed the new photograph beside it. Look carefully, they said. I did. At first, I couldn't see anything. Then I noticed it. In both photographs, there was something in the background. A building, a small structure that looked insignificant, but my soulmate pointed toward it. That wasn't there by accident. I asked what it was. They explained that years ago, the person who died had rented a small room in that building. It was one of the places where they kept documents and personal belongings, a place almost nobody knew about, except someone did. Someone had known about it then, and someone had returned there now. We decided to go, not because it was necessarily a good idea, but because every unanswered question seemed to lead us back to that same place. When we arrived, the building looked completely ordinary. That was the strangest part. There was nothing about it that suggested it had ever been connected to a secret. No warning signs, no locked gates, no dramatic evidence waiting for us, just an old building surrounded by silence. My soulmate stopped before the entrance. I haven't been here in years. I asked whether they were sure we should go inside. They nodded. I need to know. We entered. The hallway smelled old and dusty. Our footsteps echoed. Then they stopped. They pointed toward a door. That was the room. The door was locked. We looked at each other. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then they noticed something taped underneath the door. A small envelope. My name was written on it. Not theirs, mine. I felt a chill run through me. Someone had left it there specifically for me. I picked it up. Inside was a single piece of paper. There was only one sentence. You were never supposed to find out. I looked at my soulmate. They looked genuinely shocked. This isn't what I expected. I asked them what they thought it meant. They shook their head. I don't know. And that answer frightened me more than if they had known. Because if they didn't know, then someone else was controlling the story. Someone else was deciding what we were allowed to discover. Then we heard a sound behind us, a door closing. We turned around. Nobody was there. The hallway was empty. My soulmate grabbed my arm. Let's go. We walked quickly toward the entrance. Outside, everything looked normal. People passing by, cars moving along the road, a completely ordinary day. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching us. When we reached the car, my soulmate stopped. Wait. They were staring at the windshield. There was another note underneath the wiper. They pulled it free. This one contained no words, only a date. I recognized it immediately. It was the date of the death, the exact date they had spent years trying to understand. My soulmate stared at it. Then they whispered, "That's impossible." I asked why. They told me the date had never been made public in